Well, what story can I tell you next? I know, I'll tell you this one. It was told by me at Christmas time, but it doesn't have to be told at Christmas time. It can be told at any time. The title is, Why Does Heartwarming Generosity Feel So Good? And heartwarming generosity anytime feels very good. And if you can help someone and make someone smile, how lovely is that? That's a present. That's much better than things. That's something you can give someone, and I think it's a treasure to make someone smile and someone happy. Why does heartwarming generosity feel so good? Well, I'll have another little glass of water. Bonaparte, you're still sitting there, but you'll have to wait. That's my cat waiting to come in. Pierre, are you all right? You listening? Good. Right, so I shall start this next story. Why does heartwarming generosity feel so good? As Alison Macpherson and her 5-year-old son Edward, an intelligent, lively little chap, were reporting to their local police station for the 100th time the disappearance of their much-loved, mischievous family dog Murray, something unusual happened. Now Murray, a small Heinz 57 mixture, was a lovable character, very prone to roaming the area and staying away for 2 or 3 days, which caused his owners much stress and anxiety, as he was a much-loved pet. He loved going on Murray adventures, chasing the local cats. Rambo, the aggravating Ginger Tom, was a favourite target, raiding any smelly dustbins that looked promising and worth delving through for little tidbits of food, or getting the local dog gossip from his friend Monty, a British bulldog with an extraordinary repertoire of cat jokes, and who occasionally would share his sleeping quarters with Murray on a bed and breakfast basis, i.e. Murray slept fitfully back to back with Monty, who snored like a pig finding termites, on the understanding always that Murray would repay him with a few tidbits from his rounds of the dustbins from the local area. On these occasions, and I must say they were getting less now as Murray matured and found his creature comforts at home more desirable and difficult to leave, even for adrenaline-filled adventures, especially as he had to spend nights in dirty corners under trees, most often cold and comfortless. Still, Murray had had another Murray moment, and Alison and Edward were reporting once again to PC Charles Featherstone, a kindly, sympathetic man, just before he was due off duty at 6 p.m. precisely. "Don't you worry, Mrs. Macpherson. We will find Murray again for you. Bound to be in his usual haunts, on the downs at Box Hill, or raiding the kitchens at the Fox Hotel by the river. Ha ha! It is about time he gave up his wanderings." And with that, PC Charles Featherstone got out his report sheet and proceeded to write down the details which he knew by heart after the many requests for help to find Murray. Just as the large, jovial policeman had completed his report sheet, something very strange happened. The cleaner, Audrey Fairweather, burst into the reception area in a state of near hysteria. She had arrived to clean the police station and the police cells as she had done regularly every day for the past 6 years, arriving with her hand-knitted yellow shopping bag containing rubber gloves, a wrap-over apron ready to do a good, thorough, efficient job, when she heard a tiny noise coming from an old cardboard box. In fact, an old Hayes whisky box. And going over to investigate, thinking it might be a discarded kitten, to her horror, when she opened the box, there, wrapped in an old woolen green jumper, was an abandoned newborn baby. Audrey Fairweather gave a startled scream of surprise and looked further at the waif sound asleep. Obviously of foreign origin, probably Pakistani and English. Oh dear, Audrey Fairweather exclaimed. How could someone do this to a little vulnerable soul? Picking up the box, she had rushed into the police station, hence her dramatic arrival. Audrey, now in tears, said, "Some young mother must have been desperate to leave her baby on the steps of the police station, and it is only a week away from Christmas." She picked up the baby, who was completely oblivious to the drama he was causing, and cradled it in her arms, uttering encouraging words. Never mind, you are found now, we will help you. Dear, dear, poor little mite." And tears were pouring down the cheeks of the usually brisk, no-nonsense Audrey Fairweather. P.C. Charles Featherstone immediately took on the seriousness of the situation, and as he was trained to react to emergencies, telephoned for an ambulance. Meanwhile, Alison Macpherson and Edward had witnessed the whole scenario with alarm. Edward, who was only a child, had devoted parents and everything he could possibly want from one thing above all. He had everything he could possibly want, apart from one thing above all, a brother or a sister. He had always wanted a sibling to share his life with. Instead, he had the canine rogue Murray, his naughty, mischievous dog, who he adored and who regularly slept on his bed when Edward's parents were distracted on other duties, which meant often. Murray loved Edward unconditionally, and if truth be known, the only real reason he returned after his Murray expeditions was to see his beloved junior master. Edward looked up at his mother and said simply, "Couldn't we take the baby home?" "No, Edward, sadly we cannot. We are not allowed just to take a baby home, as much as we might want to. Also, I do not think your father would be pleased to have another mouth to feed," said Alison distractedly. Edward's father was Lieutenant Peter Macpherson, serving with the Signal Regiment in Afghanistan, and was his son's hero. Alison's husband was a gentle big man, and he and Alison had tried for another baby after Edward, but nothing had materialised, and after long discussions they had decided that they would be more than satisfied with their only son Edward. Alison could not sleep that night. After having Skyped her husband on base in Afghanistan, where she told him of the day's event, Murray's disappearance again, and the discovery of the newborn baby on the steps of the police station, Alison passed on the comment that Edward had suggested taking the baby without a family to their house. Peter laughed at the generosity of spirit of his son and said, "I know, Alison. He has always wanted a brother or a sister." What variety was the newborn, male or female?" "Oh, I don't know," said Alison hesitantly. "No one really looked. We were so taken up with the drama of the situation." "It has given me an idea," said Alison slowly, giving words to her idea. "We could take the baby in on a temporary basis over Christmas, What do you think, Peter? It would be good for Edward to share his Christmas." There was a pause as Peter considered the ramifications. "Well, Alison, if you think you can manage, please make the offer, as I do not know if I will be home for Christmas. It might take the edge off my absence and give Edward a result for his generosity of spirit. You can but offer. I know the local authority are always looking for foster homes." Peter laughed again. "Ah, I know you will do what you think is right for Edward." The conversation went on to other day-to-day chatter, and finally Peter said he would have to return to duty, as there was another Land Rover sortie going out into one of the Afghan war-torn villages, and he was the driver. Alison had never got used to the danger that her husband had to go through as part of his job being a lieutenant in the British Army, but was also very proud of him. Alison switched off her laptop and just sat thinking, not so much about the possible danger her husband was in, but about the prospect of fostering the tiny newborn baby. It was quite hectic in the Macpherson household, as the next day the phone rang and PC Charles Featherstone said that Murray had been found, this time in the local Fox Hotel. As it being the Christmas season, delicious menus were being served up, ensuring particularly good pickings in the hotel's dustbins. Murray had been noticed by the hotel's French chef Pierre Duval. Pierre had been employed by the management of the Fox Hotel to bring the standard of the cuisine up a few notches to be more in line with five-star gourmet establishments. He had achieved this in just 1 year, much to the amazement and pleasure of the Board of Management. He was very well able to communicate to his under-chefs exactly what he wanted and the standard he required, and would not take any slackers. Those not prepared to listen and abide by his rules were told to leave. Only a brave, foolhardy under-chef would answer back, and there would be quite a chance he would be shown the door with the comment, "If ze do not have the brain to listen and learn, then ze should not be here." So the kitchen of the Fox Hotel ran like a well-oiled machine, with some amazing meals created in its stainless steel kitchens. It was to this setup that Murray, with a piece of chicken breast in his mouth, was caught red-handed by Pierre, lifting the tasty morsel from the kitchen recycling bin. Pierre had picked up the phone and spoken to PC Charles Featherstone. "I have the thief here, a chien, dog, dirtying my kitchen and stealing the chicken breast. Thee must come immediately and take him away. He is disturbing the routine of my kitchen." PC Featherstone chuckled to himself. "Oh yes, Murray has to choose the best places." "We will be there straight away, sir," replied the efficient policeman. "We will not be long." So PC Featherstone said to his colleague on duty, PC James Dillinger, "This little dog is a real scamp. I will take the police car and bring him back to the station. Could you meanwhile ring Alison Macpherson and ask her to come and pick up her missing dog?" And with that, PC Featherstone walked purposely to the police car, turned on the flashing blue light, and picked up Murray, who actually enjoyed the rides in the police car after his adventures, feeling he was a VIP rather than a canine criminal, and barked excitedly, sitting in the back seat. "You are getting too old to be still having these adventures and worrying your owners, Murray," said PC Featherstone amicably, as secretly he thought Murray was a lively, likeable dog and could be forgiven his wandering ways. When Murray returned home, Alison gave him a severe ticking off, but all Edward could do was to keep hugging and hugging him, which gave Murray the thought that perhaps he ought to restrict his roaming tendencies, as he really did love the Macpherson household. Once the worry of the naughty Murray was out of the way, kind-hearted Alison Macpherson started to think again about the extraordinary incident at the police station when the newborn coloured baby was found in the Old Hague whisky cardboard box. Alison was on the phone to the authority dealing with abandoned children and traced the babies to St Dominic's orphanage in nearby Red Hill. Alison made an appointment to go and see the baby the very next day and asked Edward tentatively if he would come too. Edward seemed very keen on the idea, so the two of them set off, hats and scarves and warm coats put on, as the weather had taken a turn for the worst and snowflakes were falling. It was going to be a white Christmas after all. They arrived at St Dominic's beautiful building of the Queen Anne era, a mansion donated by generous benefactor Gerald Pemberton, a local businessman who had made money on the stock exchange in London with lucky investments and wanted to give something back to society. Alison rang the bell by the side of the huge oak front door, and a smiling nun in black and white habit answered. Alison and Edward were ushered into a hallway, panelled throughout, very imposing, with a beautiful chandelier lighting the area and a floor-to-ceiling Christmas tree in one corner, with Christmas parcels tumbling round the base, presents donated by the local generous-hearted community for the orphans with no families. There was a majestic marble fireplace with a welcoming log fire burning brightly, just asking for chestnuts to be roasted on the opposite side of the hall to the Christmas tree. Alison explained her interest in the abandoned baby to Sister Frances, who smiled and nodded. Yes, yes, she said briskly. Indeed, a baby was handed in 2 days ago from Pakistani and English origins. Inquiries had been made, but no information had materialised on the whereabouts of the mother. In fact, that was a complete dead end from any usual sources of hospitals and shelter searches. The baby was found to be male, and because it was near to Christmas, they had given him the name of Noel. And as fate had ordained, he had been found in a Hague whisky cardboard box, so the nuns had given him the surname of Hague. So Noel Hague it was, and Sister Frances rang a bell, and soon Alice and Edward saw the baby, now wrapped in a blue blanket, wearing a red Christmas baby grow and a little red hat with white bobble, sucking contentedly a baby bottle. Alison explained to the nun that she and her husband would like to give Noel a home and start by becoming foster parents immediately. Alison felt a thrill of excitement and apprehension as she uttered the words, giving voice to a cherished idea. Sister Frances said she would look into the formalities and let her know. Edward was overjoyed at the prospect of a brother, at least to share his experiences, but the only thing that worried his little mind was the puzzlement of the different colour of the baby's skin, dark brown instead of white as he was. Alison explained to the kind, inquiring little son that although Noel was a different colour, he was still the same as him in every other respect, and that is what makes life interesting, because of all the different nationalities in the world. Well, you can imagine the anticipation in the Macpherson household waiting just waiting for the phone call. And suddenly, 3 days before Christmas, the call came. Sister Frances, in her normal, brisk voice, said, "Yes, it has all been agreed with the board. You can foster Noel." Arrangements were made for Sister Frances to deliver Noel on Christmas Eve, initially as a temporary stay, but with the possibility of adoption. That day, Alison and Edward visited several of their neighbours, giving out Christmas cards and mince pies as they had done in years past. Much to their surprise, grateful help was received from every single neighbour who had something to contribute to the new baby's arrival. Mrs. Emily Jones gave an unwanted pushchair. Alison's best friend Andrea, slightly wistful, said, "My quiver is full. I shall never be having any more children, so you might as well have the crib, or the bedding and the baby clothes. I had been saving them for just-in-case situation," she laughed ruefully. Bit by bit, a nursery for Noel was assembled, and late on Christmas Eve there was a knock on the door of the Macpherson household, and there was Sister Frances with little baby Noel, sleeping peacefully. Alison accepted delivery of Noel and immediately gave him to Edward to hold. "Isn't he small and beautiful?" exclaimed Alison. "I'm going to share all my toys with him," Edward said thoughtfully, "but not Woody, his favourite toy." Then he reconsidered. "No, I will share Woody as well. He is a bit small for your toys at the moment, but that was very generous of you, Edward," said Alison, smiling, proud of her son. Alison Skyped Peter in Afghanistan and showed him Edward holding little Noel. Peter said, "Well, well, you have a nice new friend there, Edward." "Daddy, does it matter that he's coloured?" This was the only concern that Edward had in his childlike mind as he put his hand into little Noel's tiny brown hand. "No, son, all people are equal. It is what is underneath in their heart and spirit which is important. Nothing to do with the colour of anyone's skin," he said encouragingly as Edward held up Noel's hand, brown and white entwined. The conversation ended as Lieutenant Peter Macpherson was tired and had a plane to catch. He had just come in from another sortie in the ravaged, war-torn countryside of Afghanistan. Peter felt his step a little lighter, and his spirits rose after the terrible sights he had seen of war. From his home so many thousands of miles away came the message of hope that one day people of any race, colour or creed would be able to sit down together in friendship, respecting each other's traditions, working together in times of disaster, as indeed, without war, there were many natural disasters to cope with. Yes, Peter thought, tears in his eyes, my wife and son have given me an early Christmas present. They have renewed my faith in human nature with the taking in of the little waif they have called Noel Haig. There was to be an extra surprise for Edward on Christmas Day. On his list to Father Christmas, he had requested that his father be allowed home for Christmas, a forlorn hope, as he knew his father was on duty over the festive period. There was a knock on the front door early Christmas morning, even before Edward had cajoled his mother into opening his Christmas presents, when who should be there but his father Peter, a big grin on his face, Christmas packages hanging on his arm. What joy entered the Macpherson household! everyone hugging each other in happiness. Murray, who had accepted baby Noel without any trouble, occasionally showing interest by picking up one of the baby's toys and dropping it back into the crib just like a doggy nursemaid. "What am I doing?" mused Murray. "I must be getting soft. Not the strong adventurer Murray I used to be." He barked, not at all perturbed by the change in the household and his perceived duties as guardian of the new family member. What a Christmas day the Macpherson family had, all enjoying the ambience of all being together, plus one. The fact that they had shared their Christmas with an abandoned baby Noel gave them a real good feel factor. Why does heartwarming generosity feel so good? Thought Peter pensively. As a footnote, the paperwork all went through for Alison and Peter to adopt Noel, and he became a permanent member of the family, much to the joy of Edward. At last, a brother to share things with. Noel was a bright, intelligent and sensitive boy. His new parents introduced him to the traditions of the Pakistani side of his nationality so that he would be aware of his roots. He went on to be a successful stockbroker in the City of London and proudly kept his name of Noel Haig from the Christmas when he was found abandoned in the Haig whisky box. It just goes to show that out of disaster you can find triumph. One good turn deserves another, and Noel never forgot the orphanage that first took him in, and was a benefactor, especially at Christmas, when he paid for the entire orphanage school, staff and pupils as a special treat to go to a London pantomime of their choice. Well, that was a lovely story, wasn't it? And this story actually is dedicated to an old friend of myself and my husband Colin. We had an old friend, no longer with us, Ray Haig, who was in fact found as a baby inside a Haig whisky box. And he was half Pakistani and half English, and was adopted by a very nice English family. So there, a story with a good ending. Well, my dears, perhaps I have one more story I can tell you before I have to go for my tea. What is the tea to be today? I think it might be scrambled egg on toast. Do you like scrambled egg on toast? Yes, I like scrambled egg on toast. Well, I'm going to do a story for the little ones, I think. Yes. Yes. Here we are. A story for you little ones, children. Now, are you sitting down comfortably, putting your favourite teddy bear or toy by the side of you? Be ready. Little drink of water. Yes. Now, what shall I say? Yes. Here we are. This one is called Doris, the Daydreaming Steam Engine. Oh, I must get my handkerchief. I haven't got one. I have a little sniff. Do you have a handkerchief? You should carry a little handkerchief around with you just in case you have a tissue. Right. Doris, the Daydreaming Steam Engine. Doris used to be a very smart steam engine, painted in orange with black fenders and black chimney. And when she was puffing her way along the railway lines, pulling several loaded carriages, she looked magnificent. Steam engines passing the other way always gave her complimentary glances. One steam engine in particular always shouted over a compliment, and this was Thomas the Tank Engine, who rather liked Doris and could be heard to say, "Doris, you are looking very glamorous today. What shiny paintwork you have." Doris would always respond and say, "Oh, why thank you, Thomas. Your blue paintwork is looking pretty good today too." You see, Thomas the Tank Engine was her favourite steam engine, and she regarded him as a possible boyfriend. The other engines were not nearly as handsome as Thomas. Doris always felt special after Thomas's comments, and used to sing as she puffed along the tracks, pulling her carriages full of men and women going and coming to work in their offices and shops. "Hey diddle diddle, Thomas is my friend. Hey diddle diddle, what is round the bend?" However, over the past few months, Thomas had been passing Doris without saying anything to her, and in fact utterly ignoring her. Normally he was loaded with carriages containing holiday makers on their way to the coast, children with buckets and spades, and mothers and fathers with picnics ready for the beach. And as soon as he came round Brighton Bend, he would look out for Doris, ready to compliment her on her looks that day. So you see why Doris was so dejected. She often daydreamed of Thomas and herself, puffing along, one behind the other, to a pretty station in Devon called Sidmouth Halt, and having a picnic there, just like the passengers on Thomas's train. "Oh dear," she thought, "it will never be, as now Thomas is not even talking to me." She felt very miserable, until one day something happened to change things round completely. It happened like this. Doris was pulling her carriages and feeling very unhappy when the Fat Controller stepped out on the track and stopped the train. "Now look here, Doris, we are really fed up with you looking so miserable every day. I'm going to transfer you to another line near Oxford, where there is a shunting yard called Kidlington Halt." The Fat Controller looked very stern, as he was expecting Doris to give him some trouble over the move. "If that is what you think is best for me," said the now tearful Doris, "then I will go as soon as you like." The Fat Controller looked relieved that he was not going to have a battle on his hands. "Now come on, Doris, buck your ideas up. We do not want our passengers to see a tearful steam engine, now do we?" What he had not told Doris was that he had arranged for her to have a complete new paint job at Kidlington Halt, and that she would be painted a bright pink with black fenders and a mauve chimney. The Fat Controller had worked it out that the reason why Thomas the Tank Engine was not taking any notice of Doris any more was because her paintwork had become very shabby and scratched, and if nothing else, Thomas always admired the smart engines who kept their paintwork looking very shiny. Doris arrived at Kidlington Halt the very next day, and a group of painters had been assembled to paint Doris in lovely new colours. By the end of the week, there was a fantastic change in Doris. Her paintwork looked shiny and new, and she looked so smart and glamorous. She took one look at herself as she passed the lake close by the train track and could not believe she was that fast, shiny, new-looking engine in the reflection of the water. "Is that truly me?" she exclaimed. Immediately her spirits were lifted. To add to her happiness, round the very next bend, who should she meet coming the other way but Thomas the tank engine? He shouted across to her, "Doris, you are looking very glamorous today. What shiny paintwork you have!" "You're not looking so bad yourself," said Doris, puff, puff, puffing her way along the rail tracks. Once again she felt really happy and could be heard singing again. "Hey diddle diddle, Thomas is my friend. Hey diddle diddle, what is round the bend?" Thomas was back as her admirer again, and she could daydream about days out together to the seaside. Well, that was a lovely ending for Doris, wasn't it? Well, my dears, I might have just one story left, just one. What shall it be? Would you like one about another engine, about the railway? Or shall we have one completely different? I know. Here's a little story. Actually, I think it's a winter story. It's called The Mysterious Footprint. Now, I wrote this story for my two grandsons, Danny and Matthew. Granny Grange's story again. The Mysterious Footprint. David Thompson yawned, scratched his hair, wiggled his toes, and stretched to his full length, having just woken up after a good night's sleep. "Something's different today," he thought. "What is it?" "I know. The birds are not singing as they usually do when I wake up, and I cannot hear any cars going by on the road. How very strange," thought David. A sort of silence and a brightness came from the window when he parted his spacecraft curtains. To his amazement, he saw out the window snow. Well, was it a blanket of white fluffy snow? Yes, it was, easily 5 inches deep. It covered everything: the roofs of the houses, the lawns, the tree branches, and the road outside David's house. The birds were not singing. 1 or 2 were sitting on the wooden garden fence looking wet and forlorn. He put on his dressing gown and went downstairs. It must be early, he thought, as Mummy and Daddy had not stirred, and his baby brother Luke was happily driving trains in his dreamland. Being a curious little boy, David decided to open the front door to see exactly how his family car looked covered in snow. He opened the door slowly, trying not to let the freezing air into the house, and suddenly his eyes spied something that really surprised him. What was this? In the snow, where no person or vehicle had been before, there was the most enormous footprint, easily 3 feet long and 3 feet wide. Who could have left such a giant footprint? Said David out loud. In fact, the family cat Felix was sitting under the snow-covered family car with a worried look on his face at the snow which he had never seen before. "Come on in, Felix, before you get too cold," said David. And before the personal thing with giant the giant feet comes by again. Felix did not need to be asked twice. He scampered into the warm house with a huge cat sigh of relief. He did not like the wet, fluffy snow. It made his fur all sodden, and it would take him a long time licking it clean until he was his usual smart self again. David stared and stared at the footprint. Who or what was it? His imagination began to run riot. Was it a giant snowman that had acquired feet? Well, if it was, thought David, he would have to be at least 15 feet high. Was it a spaceman from outer space come to visit Earth, looking for a friendly house to enter? Was it a giant come to live from one of the story books that David had been reading? David puzzled and puzzled. What could it be? He did not want to wake up Mummy and Daddy, so as he was getting cold standing on the doorstep, David decided to go back into the house and mount a watch from the front window. That way, if it was a giant, he could duck down and hope the giant hadn't seen him. Not that he was frightened of giants. Most of them had a lot to say for themselves, but were so big they could not do any harm. Oh well, thought David, I shall watch behind the curtains and see if I can see who made the big footprint. I wonder. Well, David had not too long to wait, for there in the distance David could see a large man in uniform walking up the road. The nearer he got, David could see he was walking on. Oh dear, what was that? He could not believe it. It was the postman in uniform. Because it had snowed so heavily, Peter the postman, or Pete the Post as his friends called him, had made up tennis rackets to fit his shoes, so that when he walked he would not sink into the snow. He was such a dedicated postman and wanted everyone to get their post, knowing that some of his customers were children with birthdays and would be so disappointed if they had not received their birthday cards and birthday presents. When David looked again, he saw there was not just one footprint, but several large footprints. There was a tap, tap, tap on the front door. David rushed to open the door, and there was Peter Postman. He had a special delivery for the family. It was a large parcel wrapped in brown paper and string. Peter Postman said he had been looking for number 10, David's house, for several minutes, because the snow had covered all the numbers of the houses, and Peter had been given a new post round that morning and was not familiar with the house numbers. "Oh, Mr. Postman, I'm so glad it was you that made the giant footprint. I thought it might have been a giant." "Ha, ha, ha," said Peter Postman, amused that he might have been taken for a giant. "No, me lad, I am just a postman trying to do his job in the snow, which has been very deep in places. But with the help of me sturdy tennis rackets, I have managed to get round most of me customers. Even if I say it myself, I need a good pat on the back." "I really think you do, Mr. Postman. Thank you so much for delivering the parcel, and goodbye," said Davy politely. What a relief! It was tennis rackets, not footprints. Daddy and Mummy came downstairs at that moment, and David told them of his fears at seeing the oversized footprint in the snow. Daddy and Mummy laughed with David when they found out the lengths Peter the post had gone to get the post to the various houses. And when Luke came downstairs to join the family, they opened up the parcel to find it contained a huge box of sweets from Granny and Grandad. How nice was that? Well, children, I really must go for my tea now. Yes, I think it's going to be scrambled egg. So I hope you enjoyed the story so far. I must put my hat on and take Pierre with me, and off I go to my scrambled egg on toast. And here I am again with another story for you. This time it's going to be a Christmas story. So I shall put on my winter hat. Here it is. And I think Boney's going to listen to it again. He's around, so you might find him come and listen to this story as well. You haven't seen him before, but he is here. Come on, Boney. Right. Here he is. This is called The Christmas Story. Chapter 1. Colin Vincent was a hard-working man, a skilled carpenter who took a particular pride in his work. In fact, he was more interested in doing a good job than the money he would make out of it. An old-fashioned outlook, handed down by his grandfather, who also was a remarkable craftsman. Colin was always the first to do anyone a good turn or lend a helping hand, and had a great spirit of adventure. He had met and fallen in love with his lovely Veronica, a mountaineering expedition, and later they had married and produced 3 children who were the centre of their lives. It was a happy household, enough money to put food on the table, and they had renovated an old stone cottage, painstakingly, room by room, the children joining in where they could. When the cottage was at the re-roofing stage, the lively 3 had clambered up the scaffolding, and with a great deal of huffing and puffing, laughing and having great fun, helped put the tiles above their own bedrooms. So you see, life was good for the Vincent family, but suddenly it was all to change. Colin Vincent had finished a very demanding carpentry job at the vicarage, which was conveniently within walking distance of his home. The job had taken 3 weeks and was to fabricate and install a magnificent oak staircase, one of his best jobs. It was Christmas, and Colin was walking down the road, about to cross the drive of his house, feeling very pleased with himself, when there was a screech of brakes and a blue sports car veered over the pavement, out of control, and knocked Colin Vincent to the ground. Chapter 2. Colin had left hospital and returned to his family in the little village of Grangeville, his life in ruins, as he could not go out to work and earn money with his hands. He was a very skilled carpenter, much in demand. Now his career was over, and with a bad arm his prospects were not very great. He felt useless, and his normal, happy disposition gradually changed, and he became morose and full of self-pity, while his family looked on helplessly. No money had come into the family apart from his wife's Veronica, who had taken on extra work just to pay the hire purchase and mortgage. There was barely anything left for food, heating and clothing. Items had been sold to help out the meagre income, even their old Christmas decorations and some of their furniture. Christmas looked as though it was going to be a very dismal affair. Chapter 3. The children had all tried to cheer their father up. Justine 17, Jane 16 and Sarah 12, and Peppy the family dog. Peppy kept putting his paw on his master's knee with a sorrowful look in his eyes as if to say, "I'm still here being loyal and faithful." Colin's wife Veronica was beginning to look tired and exhausted, the bills piling up, and even one or two debt collectors calling at the house. Friends from the village had tried to help, and they had been invited out for Christmas Day and Boxing Day. But Colin was a proud man and would not accept charity, as he knew he would not be able to produce any contribution to the festivities. So he had said no on behalf of the family. They would survive on their own. The family were now faced with selling the family home, a place they had all built up and cherished over the years. All these thoughts were running through Colin's mind as he sat there, wondering how he would sort his problems out. If only his right arm would heal and he could work again. What devastation to one family the act of one drunken driver had caused. Normally a close family, Colin and his wife Veronica were arguing and strained with each other. Colin let out a deep sigh, the sad look never leaving his thin and drawn face. He sat looking out of his workshop window. The night was clear, the stars were twinkling, and suddenly there was a tap, tap, tap on the window. He looked up, startled. Yes, it was beginning to snow. Christmas Eve, and it was snowing. So it was going to be a white Christmas after all. With the prospect of no logs for the fire and no decorations or presents, it was hardly believable that they could become so poor. No television, that had to be sold weeks ago. Oh, why did it have to happen to me, thought Colin. Why couldn't it have happened to someone else? He looked up again at the window and saw that the snow was settling. The tidy workshop, which normally this time of year would have been a hive of activity, making different Christmas presents for the family, lay idle and dusty. Colin fell into a deep, exhausted sleep. Worry had kept him awake on most nights recently. The snow was piling up on his workshop window as he slept. Chapter 4. Unbeknown to Colin, there was great excitement in the rest of the Vincent household. The children had decided they would take a hand in reversing the cruel fate which had befallen their father Justin, a tall, good-looking young man, a college student, kind and conscientious and caring by nature, had taken his two sisters to one side a few weeks previously and said to them that something must be done to help their father's plight. After some mind searching, they had come up with a plan to help the family fortunes, each by taking on a part-time job. This, they declared, would get them over the bad patch and make Christmas a happy one. Justin had found a job in a local builder's firm, labouring at weekends. Back-breaking hard work, but the money was good. In the evenings he worked as a waiter at a pizza parlour and had managed to get his sister Jane a job as waitress. They were given a free meal which helped out at home, and their mother could not understand why on certain evenings they were not hungry. Another waiter who lived in the same village had his own car, so they managed to get a lift free of charge, as George said he would not hear of them paying, knowing what hard times they were going through. Sarah had taken on 2 newspaper rounds and helped the next-door farmer with his animals at the weekends. Veronica, their mother, was working long, weary hours and was not aware of the extra work her offsprings were putting in, although she did notice that her 2 eldest were keeping late hours. Justin was probably using up his energy taking the girls out, she mused, grimacing slightly to herself. He would certainly break a few hearts, she thought, before he settled down. Chapter 5. As the snow was piling up on the fields and paths outside the family cottage, the plan was taking shape for the Vincent household family Christmas. The adults were unaware of the activity. Colin Vincent was asleep in his workshop, sleep solving all his problems for the time being, although it was a fitful, restless sleep. Veronica Vincent was also slumbering after being ushered to her bed by her eldest daughter. She was so tired and would have dropped had not Jane sensed her fatigue and insisted on an early night with a cup of cocoa. Her job as chief fashion buyer in the local departmental store was very demanding at Christmas this time of year, and with the words, "Leave everything to us, Mum. We'll sort out the meal for Christmas Day." "Oh, all right, dear," Veronica wearily replied. I'm sorry there's so little this year. I was planning on getting up early and making a few cakes and sweets for Christmas Day." Her voice trailed off as she fell into a deep, exhausted sleep. The three got to work. Gone was the usual bickering. Now was the time for teamwork. Justin went outside and brought in the pile of logs, which he had stored in their outside barn. He had made a deal with a local farmer who had happened to come into the pizza parlour, and the logs were free, provided Justin helped cut the trees down and chop up the logs for several customers. Back-breaking work again, but well worth it for the free load of logs. The logs were piled up by the Inglenook fireplace. Sarah had laid the newspaper and sticks all ready to be lit Christmas morning. Jane was in the kitchen, flour and margarine being turned into delicious pastry for mince pies and sausage rolls. She had previously made a Christmas cake and a Christmas chocolate log, and had allowed Sarah to decorate them much to her delight. The floor-to-ceiling Christmas tree was brought into the lounge, and the three agreed it was the best-shaped Christmas tree they had ever seen. A Christmas fairy was placed on top of the tree by Jane, to bring us good luck, she said, and they all began putting shiny balls and tinsel on the tree. Justin had bought some lights, which twinkled brightly as the decorations began to festoon the room. Sarah was humming Christmas carols as she worked tirelessly. This was going to be the best Christmas they had ever had. They were all determined that this should be so. The Christmas presents were wrapped and stacked at the foot of the tree. Veronica had been given a soft pink fleecy dressing gown with embroidery on the lapels. Jane liked this very much herself. For their father they had bought an illustrated book on aviation through the ages, as he had been an ex-RAF pilot and was keenly interested in aeroplanes. A large bone had been acquired from the village butcher for Peppy the dog, and numerous other smaller presents were waiting to be unwrapped. By 3 a.m. in the morning all the jobs were done. The house had a bright, happy glow about it. The food was prepared, the presents wrapped, stockings at the end of the beds were all filled with mysterious shapes, and even Peppy had a sports sock hung up for him by his box full of doggy chews and a rubber ball. By this time Colin Vincent had been shepherded up to bed by his son, and was too bleary-eyed and depressed to see the changes that had come over the household. The three sat together in the lounge, tired but happy after their night's work. A mince pie and a well-earned mug of coffee for each of them, and very hopeful that their efforts would cheer up their father. Chapter 6. There was one last job to be done. Justin drew a plain envelope from his pocket. His savings over the previous week had amounted to £300. Jane's evenings in the pizza parlour had netted her £200 after paying out for the decorations and presents. Sarah struggled to make £50. Getting up early to arrive on time for her paper rounds had been a major effort, and she was looking forward to some lay-ins after Christmas. They put the money in the envelope and Justin sealed it, firmly sticking down the envelope, knowing he could have spent the money on himself, but the good feeling he felt inside himself chased any such thoughts away, particularly when he knew the relief he hoped to bring his father, who seemed to be in perpetual gloom these days. This envelope was to be given to Colin Vincent on Christmas morning. The money would help to pay off the most pressing bills and give them more time to find a way out of their difficulties. Justin hoped it would raise a smile on his father's face. Chapter 7. When everyone woke up on Christmas morning, there was a white glow coming from outside. Sarah rushed to the window. The landscape outside had been turned into a vivid, gleaming white, as if someone had tipped a pot of white paint all over it. "Happy Christmas!" shouted Sarah, as she rushed excitedly into her parents' bedroom. "Happy Christmas, Mum and Dad!" and planted a big kiss on the cheeks of her half-awake parents. Well, children, I think I will stop the story now, as I need to go and have a cup of tea. So, right, I'm going for a cup of tea. Well, here we are. Had a lovely cup of tea, and we'll continue with our Christmas story. "Well, happy Christmas," shouted Sarah as she rushed excitedly into her parents' bedroom. "Happy Christmas, Mum and Dad," and planted a big kiss on the cheeks of her half-awake parents. Justin and Jane came and sat on their parents' bed, and they all talked about building a snowman, their problems forgotten for the moment. Then Justin put his hat in his dressing-gown pocket and produced the envelope. So much hard work had gone into producing the contents that his hand shook a little as he handed the precious sum to his father, an earnest look coming on his face as he said, "Dad, we know you've been going through hard times recently because of the accident and your arm, and the three of us have collected together some money from various jobs. We want you to use this money to pay off the pressing bills, and you'll see downstairs where we have spent the rest of the money. Happy Christmas, Dad." Colin Vincent looked up into the faces of his three children, who were looking at him anxiously, their love and affection for him showing in their eyes. He slowly opened up the envelope, saw the contents with amazement, and realized that some of his problems were temporarily solved by the generosity of his family. He was overcome with feelings of relief and pride. A lump was in his throat when he thanked the three. He felt his son had suddenly grown up and become a man over this period of crisis. He hugged his daughters, and a feeling of great happiness began to take over the Vincent household. Jane insisted her father unwrap the present in his Christmas stocking, and the new sweater chosen carefully by Jane was much admired. The family dispersed to get dressed and all assembled at the breakfast table. Colin and Veronica had tears of happiness in their eyes as they looked around the lounge at the beautiful Christmas tree and presents stacked at the foot of the tree, the decorations and all the food. The log fire was lit, and an aroma of wood smoke pervaded the air. If there was a good fairy at Christmas time, she had certainly worked a good effect in the Vincent household, thought Colin Vincent. But there was still more to come. Colin Vincent sat at the breakfast table, his face wreathed in smiles. This morning happy family banter interspersed with happy laughter could be heard in the cottage. Suddenly Colin's face changed to utter disbelief and amazement, and then complete abandoned exultation. Did you see that, Veronica? He shouted across the table to his startled wife. Did you see that? I passed the plate of toast to Sarah. I know you did, Dad, said Sarah, so what's there to get excited about? But I did it with my right hand, exclaimed Colin Vincent. My right hand is working. The feeling has returned. He got up and did a little hop and skip around the breakfast table. The family were delighted. Colin shook his son by the hand, man to man. Veronica said she needed a glass of sherry to celebrate and steady her nerves. Really, all this excitement was almost too much for her to take in. The Vincent household had the best Christmas they had ever had. Now they would not have to sell their family house. Christmas afternoon, Colin Vincent was in his workshop, humming cheerfully to himself as he made up 2 toboggans for the family. He bent down to pat Peppy the dog and received a wet lick on his ear. Even Peppy seemed to understand that something wonderful had happened to his family of humans, and he was going to join in the happiness. This really is a happy Christmas, thought Colin, as he closed his workshop door, 2 toboggans in his hand, a very different man to the one who had sat there the night before, bemoaning his lot. A broad smile crossed his face as he saw his children putting the finishing touches to a snowman, with Peppy barking at this icy intruder and making a nuisance of himself. Happy Christmas to everyone, thought Colin Vincent, and goodwill to all men. If everyone had a family like mine, there would certainly not be any more wars in the world, he thought as he proudly strolled out to join what money could buy, what money could not buy. A truly loving family. Well, what a lovely, lovely, lovely story. And that story was dedicated to my 3 lovely children, Ewan, Heidi and Zoe. And of course now they have their own families, their own husbands, and my grandchildren, Harriet, Daniel, Matthew and Olivia, of whom I am extremely proud, and extremely proud to be their Granny Grange. And I hope they enjoy all these stories. Good night, everyone. I've finished for the moment.